Now this is something you have to be aware of. This tree right now, the way it's growing, it knows every branch that's up there, and it has just the right amount of roots in the ground to grow all those branches, all the leaves, and all the fruit. When I cut out those water shoots and a few tips on the end of these branches and take out some of that vertical in there, this tree has more roots than it needs. And the roots that it doesn't need will die. And you don't really want that to happen. That's why if you have a mature tree, this is just 2 years from being pruned, but you can imagine what a nightmare this would look like if it hadn't been pruned in 5, 10, or 20 years. But all that growth means it has massive roots under the ground. Because people have asked me, what do you do with mature trees? Well, you can't cut it all back 1 year. Because if you cut a huge tree, if this was 5 times as many things growing in there as it is, had been pruned in 10 years, if you cut everything back to a few branches and a few clusters and you're all happy because now it's shaped so good, but all your roots are going to die because they don't have any work to do. It's that simple. And on a dwarf, and if you want to try to get an old tree back into shape, you can do it, but it'll take you 4 or 5 years of cutting. You can't, apples you can go 25%. You can cut out 25% of an apple tree. It's probably better to try to keep it at 15 or 20%. And on an old tree that you have to take out a big limb. Sorry folks, but I had to get a drink of water. I had so much pollen in my throat from all this wind blowing around. But when you take an old tree like that and take out a big limb, that could be 25%. And it's just a gauge in your mind. And sometimes you have diseased limbs that have to come out. They have canker or disease, and you've got to cut them out because it will spread and kill the tree. If you get fire blight, you'll get those more on pears than anything else. If you get fire blight, hey, you can go pray. That's about the only thing that's going to help you, because fire blight would take a tree in a heartbeat. You can lose a pear tree in a year, a young pear tree, 4 or 5 years old. We saw it down the river. We had a pear tree, got fire blight on it. I religiously dipped my thing into 110 solution of bleach and made cuts, cut it off, put it in plastic bags, carried it to the trash, not the landfill where they make mulch. I put that in the trash can, and the next year it died. It was dead. Fire blight is horrible, and fire blight will come if you put too much nitrogen on these things, and they have a whole lot of leaves and stuff, and they're growing too rapidly, and they're really just tender because they don't harden off as well because it's so much leaves and foliage, and you'll get fire blight, and you don't want that. So anyway, it's a big trade-off with how much you cut above the tree, above the ground, to according to how many roots. So when I cut all those little shoots off and some of the verticals, it's not going to be horrible. I'm just going to top some of that mess. I'm trying to get some light in here to the center, but most of my apples are on the outside. Then the roots, there are more roots than what I have tree, so they're going to send out more water shoots. And when they come out light green, you got to knock them off with your fingers so you don't have to make a big cut later. And if you stay after it, you won't have a big problem. You'll still get some shoots, but if you do it, especially when it's dormant, not now, you will cut back on the water sprouts, and as the tree grows and gets more growth and more leaves, you'll get more in balance with the roots. And everywhere you go, especially around banks and buildings that have ornamental fruit trees that blossom so beautiful in the spring this time of year, they pile the mulch up all the way to the bark. You cannot do that. You can't plant these fruit trees any lower than they were planted in the pot. If you get a bare root plant, you can look on that plant and see where the soil line was. That's where you have to plant it. Now when you have that bark sitting there, and I put a big collar around this, and I piled up mulch up the trunk for a foot and didn't leave a space between the mulch and the trunk will stay wet, the bark will die, and your tree will die. I don't know why they do it. It's just like a beaver. He would come here and just gnaw a 2-inch ring around that tree. He's in no hurry. The tree could be 30 inches in diameter. It could be 100 feet tall. It's going to fall down, because when you girdle a tree like that, you can actually just go with a knife, cut a circle all the way around there, about 1 or 2 inches apart, take a chisel, pop all the bark off, and that tree will die. And you can't save it. It's done for. So by putting mulch around it like that, the bark gets soft and wet and stays wet. Disease, bugs, everything enter the bark. The bark dies because see how dry it is there? It's not wet. Think about the mulch around the bark on these trees. You'll kill them.